A great pleasure and an honor to be joining this panel of distinguished speakers, and more importantly, the context and the time that we are dwelling in India and around the world, actually, the right wing radicalism, and as well as about what is happening in India itself is so important that we come together and raise our voices and I particularly, in my view, as a political scientist, in reading political thought and in about teaching political thought about like Western or the Indian political thought to the students, and I've always felt that why in India we don't recognize our own thinkers or our own philosophers and or even extraordinary individuals like EVR Periyar or Tande Periyar, as he is popularly and very famously known as. And I always see him, I continue to see him as a social philosopher and a social revolutionary. But although the metaphor that was restricted about him is that he's a philosopher and a revolutionary in southern India. And in many a times I thought that he should have been recognized as one of the eminent philosophers of Indian society and Indian polity as well. They're so significant, his influence and his thought. And but I understand that today under the circumstances how we write history and we document history is that Periyar has been reduced to the south, and Periyar has been reduced to the state of Tamil Nadu, and so this is a kind of a sad and a tragic reality of how we celebrate and observe our great leaders and great thinkers. So, in context of Periyar's, and I look at Periyar as an enlightened philosopher, humanist, radical, and revolutionary. And Periyar today remains hugely influential in the sense to the politics of ideas, in India, and then into the pre-independent India, and his conversations with Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and as well as about is following the works of eminent social reformers and then thinkers like Jyotirao Phule. And in the later years, how in context of Tamil Nadu also, that the Periyar's works and thought processes influence and shaping the minds of generations of children, generations of young men, young women. And I mean, when I say this generations is that it is a very realistic observation and a very, very realistic and down to the earth and to the ground reality is that he did and he continues to influence and generations of young men and women in this country, and more particularly in the south and emphatically in the state of Tamil Nadu. So this is the larger picture of Tande Periyar I have about, and I continue to be inspired by his work. And in terms of if you look at him is what are the foundations of Periyar as a social revolutionary and a social philosopher is that, and he fundamentally chooses to define and critique the Indian philosophy. And Periyar's critique of Indian philosophy is that it's very important to understand his later writings and as well as his works and his activism and his political and public life. And his interpretation starts from the Indian philosophy is deeply located in the Aryan interpretation and Indo-Aryan, the concept of the Aryan interpretation of the Vedic Brahmanism. The Vedic Brahmanism, which is rooted, which is based on the Manusmriti. And once you kind of subscribe to the idea of the Manusmriti, and which kind of two eminent and two the sources is that One, you need to kind of like subscribe and you need to follow the caste system. Then you also have to follow the concept of karma. The karma is that, like, it's not in your hands. It is not in your hands. Once you say caste, and like, you're born, reborn, and then you connect with the karma, then this is nothing but the subjugation of the entire society to the idea of Brahminism, or to the Brahminical interpretation of the state as well as the power itself. So the Periyar's this is a very, very scientific understanding of the Indian society from the philosophical foundations of the Indian philosophy and the flaw and the fault line in the Indian philosophy itself. But then we need to ask this question, like, do we not have, don't we have any other philosophers who are not rooted in this, the so-called the Aryan and the Dravid, and what you call is like, the Aryan interpretation, the Vedic Brahminical interpretation of the Indian philosophy is that this is the role of Hinduism. Then in this context of Hinduism, it's also like, the whole idea of aggrandizing the entire subcontinent, with this view of the Aryan domination as well as the Manusmriti rooted, the basis is that it has completely either negated or co-opted the indigenous values and indigenous practices in worship. And when I say worship, is that, like, some of the scientific aspects of worship in that, and not necessarily to be seen in, like, questioning the concept of God, because the concept of God itself is the creation of the man. The concept itself is the creation of the man, and how you create the God, it's the creation of man. Therefore, historically, many traditional indigenous societies have developed what you called as in terms of the worshipping what they fear. So, like, how the Aryan, in the what you call that, like, the Vedic Brahminism, or like, the Manuvadis, or what you call as Varnashrama Dharma, is that it tried to integrate this, like, absolve this fear into this context of the status, the power status. So, like, in questioning that, Periyar rises like the revolutionary in a society, a social revolutionary, and an extraordinary intellectual of his time. And, like, virtually in times of, like, what you call the Periyar today, like, not only influential, but also in terms of that, why that idea of, like, is because of his stance on caste, social justice, and a rationalist worldview of religion, critique of religion, and a rationalist paradigm that he builds about religion is that, like, when the Western philosophy and Western revolutionary concepts is that you need to place reason ahead of every other aspect in political philosophy. Then what Periyar does is that Periyar emphatically places reason, and then in terms of rationalizing the institution of religion, in terms of that, like, what are the basis, how the Indian philosophy has been built, why he criticizes the Indian society in terms of built on the Manusmriti. And, like, today that Periyar, like, very interestingly is that, like, the role and contribution of Periyar is that in Indian politics, that how I had said that in the writing the modern contemporary history is that the negation and then the sidelining of the Periyar is that in the mainstream discourse of politics and then in terms of social justice. But in Tamil Nadu particularly is that today in the Indian politics is that Tamil Nadu is the bulwark against the BJP. And there is one thing that stands between the BJP and RSS and capturing and coming into power in Tamil Nadu is not simply the political parties, like most of us want to believe. Most of us want to believe there are political parties that will fight against the BJP, or there are political organizations that will stand up against the RSS. It is a very simple assessment. The realistic assessment, the reality is that it is the Periyar. The Periyar's ideology, Periyar's a social revolutionary like Periyar, and a social radical like Periyar, and an enlightened philosopher like Periyar, and where his ideas have gone deeply enrooted into the society. Today, Tamil Nadu's social history is that the social history of the Dravidian movement is that it is not restricted to the political parties that we see in the mainstream political arena. But the social movement in Tamil Nadu, the social movement in the South is far more deeper than the political parties. That's the reality. Therefore, when people say that Dravidian parties have gone into a decay, and therefore BJP and RSS are an alternative, is that's not an argument, and that the social movement is still deeply relevant. And then in terms of there is a very interesting, Periyar is still the chief patriarch of the Dravidian movement and the Dravidian parties. Although he had taken a very clear position about the party and power, and he was one of the earliest advocates on the question of the non-party politics. And after he kind of relinquished his office in Erode as in the Erode municipality chairmanship, and then he never went back to claim power, because he wanted to work through and with the people and transform the power, not capturing power. That's where his ideas and identity stands to be respected. Then in terms of, he continues to be the chief patriarch, as I mentioned to you, and also that C.N. Annadurai had C.N. Annadurai was his disciple, and also he was groomed at the loom of Periyar. And then C.N. Annadurai also had many disagreements with him, mainly on the question of party politics and power and contesting elections. But C.N. Annadurai never compromised on one view, is that my leader is Periyar is my leader. I mean, that's not a simple acknowledgement for a political party that has captured power in the state in 1967. Absolutely, they swept the elections. But he continued to revere him as my leader. This is one of the rarest occasions when the party that when the DK splits, and 1949 and DMK gets formed and subsequently comes to power in 1967. But during this entire period, and besides all the differences, the DMK or any other political party in Tamil Nadu is that they deeply understand, acknowledge the ground realities, is that it is not just the political parties. There is something unique about this extraordinary man, and social reformer, social philosopher, a social revolutionary. And then in another political society, if you sometimes we compare, when you call him as the the Socrates, we call him as the Socrates. When people think that what is something unique about Socrates and why he has to be called as the Socrates in the East, I'm not comfortable with the metaphors the Eastern Socrates or the Western Periyar and thing. But the main reason is that the ability to question. That's the central argument, that the consciousness, the question, and then uncompromising virtue. The ability to question and an uncompromising virtue to stand up against all odds and to pursue the struggle. I think that makes, the last picture, when we see the picture of Socrates taking the poison and then consuming the death, virtually, is that I always like to believe that one aspect is that the ability to question, and also an uncompromising virtue to unreasonable, irrational, and the state of the pressure system. So Periyar remains in the same way. And another aspect is that today in context of Indian politics as well as in Tamil Nadu politics, is that the parties like BJP and then RSS, socio-political organization, continue to underestimate the social impact and the political influence of Periyar. Not only as an ideologue, Periyar was not simply an ideologue and who sat at home and then ran a party or an organization. He walked, traveled miles and miles and miles together. Then I learned from reading some of his works that even in the last year of his life, and he traveled for about, he delivered 192 speeches in the last year of his life. 100 and about 177 speeches, and the previous year about 170 man days he traveled. So is a very hard working and very deeply committed, and what he considered as the very simplistic in his life, frugal and honesty. People always talk about Gandhi's manner of keeping accounts. Periyar was far more strict than Gandhi in managing finance, and as frugal as he could. That he set an example. Why I mention all this, that a social revolutionary like Periyar, and walking the path and transforming the grounds of politics, is that, and today Periyarism remains the challenge for entry and growth for BJP in Tamil Nadu. And it is the social ideology of the Dravidian movement and struggle spearheaded by leaders like Periyar is the major hurdle. And I would even say that the Periyar remains the heart of the battle between the forces of Dravidian social ideology and the Hindutva of the BJP more than ever before. This is why Periyar should be, and rightfully should be acknowledged as one of the most eminent philosophers of modern India. And not simply as a philosopher, person who contributed only for social justice. If we are talking today, we are celebrating Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar's 200th birth anniversary, 26th, 200 years ago. And we have 1820, and 26th of September is Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar's birth, and today is the 200 years. And that is Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar's birth is considered as is part of the Renaissance, Indian Bengal Renaissance and Indian Renaissance. I also think that Periyar's life and Periyar's ideas, and not simply a social philosopher and a revolutionary of the Tamil Nadu or of the South, but of Indian subcontinent. And because Periyar travels a vast terrain, not I also when I talk to people that even if you believe in God, Periyar needs to be understood and explained, needs to be understood and appreciated, even if you are not an atheist, because that he applies reason. He applies rationality, and not the rationality of a constructive rationalism, where you can construct any way by placing one upon the other, but scientific reasoning. That's what Periyar is to be seen as. Scientific reasoning in the sense, look at this metaphor, his understanding of Indian philosophy. He says Indian philosophy is deeply rooted in Manusmriti. And the Manusmriti is that which classifies and simply divides, polarizes the entire society by saying that you are destined to be, your birth and death is to be destined by your karma, and then the caste, then you are trapped, you are a slave. Now he is a liberator. He is a liberator like many other social liberators who have worked, toiled and struggled and sacrificed their lives and the price they paid for. And in the same sense, in a way that, he tried to bring about, when he talked about self-respect movement or self-dignity movement, and then when he brought, he was also was fairly influenced by the socialistic ideals. He was against the exploitation of the capital. He was against the exploitation of the labor. And then he was also against, and very, very deeply, and very strongly, he upheld the rights of the women, and he upheld the rights of the women, and to that extent about whether in terms of the widow remarriage or about the marriage decision, and then on the property issues and on the child marriage issues, and eminently Periyar is virtually in the women's education, and more than women's education, Periyar also had said that women should decide their employment, and they should take to, even if necessary, to the police and the armed forces. Today, when the government of India made its announcement about the recruitment of women into police as well as in armed forces, Periyar was one of the earliest voices in the 1920s to speak about the women's right to employment, more particularly, if necessary, also they can choose if they want into police and armed forces. Why I say this is that a philosopher has to be seen in a much more holistic and a collective way. And he was not just simply talking about religion. He was talking about scientific reasoning with really institution of religion. And he was talking about Indian philosophy, the foundations, questioning, the critiquing the foundations of Indian philosophy. And then, the scientific knowledge that any quality that you attribute to a philosopher. And then in terms of, he also talked about, what particularly that impresses me is that, and he often said that, he shared a very interesting relationship with Rajaji, otherwise known as the C.R. Rajagopalacharya. And C.R. Rajaji is that, and he was one of his best friends, and he consulted him at all crucial, critical times on the personal warmth and mutual respect for each other. But he never hesitated to question Rajaji when Rajaji introduced what they called his education policy, which in Tamil Nadu we call that as Kulakalvi, that based on the family and purely the caste, a Brahminical interpretation of professional heritage system. And then, he said that I'm not against Brahmins, but I'm certainly against the Brahmanism. I'm against that Varnashram Dharma. I'm against that, Sanatan Dharmashram thing. I'm against that, the Brahmin and the Baniya coalition in the Indian politics, in Indian social ethos. So, he very clearly defines his social philosophy. He clearly defines his revolutionary thoughts and ideas, and also materialistic understanding of history. Periyar also had a materialistic understanding of the social and economic history of India. And we often think the social and the materialistic history of India is that the moment you question, critique the Indian caste system, is that you are talking about the materialist, social and materialistic interpretation of history itself. Periyar, all of us talk about the caste and the critique of the caste, but Periyar was able to see that there is a kind of the materialistic and then the economic history of India should also have to be linked to the caste system and the social hierarchy, social stratification. I think this is the mind of a social revolutionary and a social philosopher. And then there is one area I want to I want to narrate a very small, very interesting conversation that VP Singh, as the Prime Minister of India, he was demitting his office. I remember that that particular morning, it's a midday around 11 o'clock, 11:30 in New Delhi. I was living in New Delhi at that time. I was teaching in Delhi University. And I remember that morning, it's an amazing day, kind of a very warm sunshine, light sunshine. And the media met VP Singh, and who was demitting his office. He lost his majority in the parliament and support in the parliament. And so he was going to meet the president of India at that time. So the media met him, the press met him. The press asked him a question that, Mr. VP Singh, and you are going to demit your office, and you probably are one of the shortest tenure prime ministers in this country. How does it feel to be a shortest tenure prime minister in this country? So short, a few months you have been a prime minister. And VP Singh said, I'm equally proud the fact that I have had the shortest time to make the greatest impact on the Indian society, that no one dared to touch and implement Mandal Commission, which I did, that people had many, many years in power. That's a telling statement about the social justice movement in India. But behind that statement, I want to kind of narrate about a fact is that Periyar believed in communal representation in education and employment right from 1921. And then he fought for the GO, government order with the British government, that there should be a representation for the backward and the Dalits and the marginalized people in the society in education and employment. But this particular GO was quashed when India became free and struck down by the High Court of Chennai, Madras High Court. And then, as based on the claim that this is against the tenets of the Constitution, or what the famously said as the ultra vires of the Constitution. And the Supreme Court of India upheld this verdict of the Madras High Court, and then Periyar continued to make enormous representation, appeal, and protest, and mobilizing masses. At that time, the Chief Minister, and as well as the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, and took a sympathetic view of this particular protest and gave a deep listening. And amazing thing is that the first amendment to the Constitution of India came from the recommendations and the struggle of Tandai Periyar. That is the Article 15, and then the Section 4, and which clearly that amendment, I shall quote that amendment, which says, nothing in this article or in clause 2 of Article 29 shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens, or for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes. So this is a very important amendment, the first amendment to the Constitution of India. And that came from the life and the works of Tandai Periyar's work. It is this, I quoted this, narrated this incident of VP Singh to a few minutes back. I want to connect this incident of the press conference to VP Singh, and as well as this first amendment. And it's really very moving about how a philosopher in his own lifetime and later his impact of his works can be seen from the fact it is this amendment which enabled the appointment of Mandal Commission, whose recommendations marked as watershed in the social history of India. And this is the most stunning contribution of Tandai Periyar to the movement, social justice, the cause of social justice, and to the movement of social justice movement in this country, and to the virtue of democratization of the Indian polity and society. And I am very happy and proud to quote this first amendment to the Constitution. And lastly, before making submissions of my presentation, and Periyar today is part of the political culture of Tamil Nadu. And but I would rather say he's been restricted to the political culture of Tamil Nadu. And I strongly hope and wish, and sometime now or in the near future, that Tandai Periyar, it becomes part of the political culture of the South and the entire country, because of the fact that India is a nation of nationalities. It's a multicultural, plural, and multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multiracial nation. In such a nation that if Periyar remains in one part of the country, and if Hindutva remains all over the country, that there cannot be a nation. So that nation, we have to redefine nationalism. We have to redefine social justice. We have to redefine that what is our philosophy itself? What is our social philosophy? What is the meaning of revolution itself? We need to redefine. Revolution is not as Mao always very famously said, it is not just one. It's about we need to bloom for 1,000 years. So Periyar in that sense is that the revolution of Periyar is still alive in India. And it's still alive. There is still as I mentioned to you, that if there is anything between the BJP and RSS as well as with the rest of the state in Tamil Nadu, is that it is Periyar standing like a tower of the Vindhyas. And you have to meet Periyar, you have to challenge Periyar. So that is why often when we say that his statues, his ideas, and about comments on him made by the hooligans and the hoodlums, and often is that they get attention by talking about Periyar. but they can't change the society. But people like Periyar will continue to inspire, will continue to be the drawing board of the social thought and the social justice movement, as well as about the anti-caste movement in this country, and more importantly about the movements of social equality, economic equality, and women's rights. And so all this encompassing is why I consider that, like, I very humbly want to say that, he's a revolutionary of his time, and also a political, enlightened political philosopher, comparable with the era of Renaissance in the West, and as well as with the, like, in the reading the Renaissance in the Indian context, is that the time always kind of, like, lapses and coincides, is that we need to pick up Indian Renaissance at different points of time in Indian history. I think Indian history also has to pick this era and the life and the time of Ivera Periyar or Tande Periyar as the era, age of Renaissance and age of enlightenment, age of reason, and also the age of social justice. And at last, Periyar is also part of the, not only the political culture, but he's also part of the popular culture. And what is this popular culture is that how far and how deep a social movement kind of, like, touches the earth. Like, how far and deep the social movement touches the earth. In that sense alone, I can say that, like, Periyar is not only the kind of, like, the guiding, what they call the dynamo or the guiding light of the Dravidian movement, is the patriarch, or what you call remains the fountainhead of the Dravidian movement and the social ideology of the Dravidian social thought. And I would like to kind of sum here, and I want to thank the organizers and the other distinguished members in the panel and who joined me in this discussion. I want to thank all of you humbly, and I want to appreciate and congratulate the organizers for taking up this event. Thank you, one and all.